Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Help for the Guiltless. My name, of course, is Antoine. Now, before I start, I want to apologize for my extended hiatus over the last 2 weeks. Life outside of YouTube has become quite hectic, and I'm doing my best to keep my head about me and continue doing what I've been doing. So, I'm going to plod along, and we're going to continue on. So, if you have followed me on my new streaming show on Sundays, Caffeinated or Die, you would have heard me read some very ridiculous headlines. But none as ridiculous as this. Dungeons and Dragons to introduce sex fluidity in elves. This is where we're headed, folks. Now, I'm not afraid to admit it. I'm a D&D nerd. I mean, everyone likes a little bit of role-playing. But I'm more of a tabletop type person. So, when I read this, I had just one burning question. And it was summed up in one word. Why? Well, Christian Hoffer is gonna let us know, and so is comic book WWG. Dungeons & Dragons is set to introduce a new feature for elves that will allow characters to change their gender once per day. Again, I ask the simple question, why? This is not needed. Is it to pander? It's to pander to the Tumblrites that decide that they need to change their gender fluidly every fucking hour because they need to have those oppression points in order to be relevant in whatever they're doing. This is just the first paragraph, so I'm jumping ahead here. Let's actually give Christian a chance to describe why this is important. Every week, the D&D Beyond app releases new videos that explore the world of Dungeons & Dragons. Their most recent video features D&D lead rules designer Jeremy Crawford and talks about the Drow, one of the more popular elf subraces in the game. While the bulk of Crawford's video discusses Drow culture, he notes that the upcoming Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes introduces a special ability that some elves use to choose their gender at the start of each day. For those of you who don't know what a Drow elf is, this is a Drow elf. Now, believe it or not, I actually know a lot about Drow elf culture because it is one of my favorite races. They're actually a matriarchy, a violent, sadistic, evil matriarchy. They really give no fucks about the male Drow elves, and it's all about the female empowerment. One of the big themes in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes is the concept that elves were once a mutable race. Their creator, Corellin Laurentia, was an androgynous being, and elves could originally change their forms at will, although they eventually lost this ability when they descended into the material plane. This is some new canon type bullshit, because that was never a thing. I am really versed in 3.0 and 3.5. This has never come up. Do you want to know where it comes up? Well, when you get the belt of sex change, and you trick one of your players into putting it on, or in the big blue book of erotic fantasy. This was not a thing. Elves and the elven species of Dungeons & Dragons has always been a sexually dimorphic species. You are pandering to people who are not going to buy your product. However, according to Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, some elves retain a blessing of Corellian. As part of this blessing, these elves can actually choose their biological sex whenever they finish a long rest. These elves can choose to be male, female, or neither based on their moods or feelings. Again, they must be changing things up, because as far as I remember, elves don't sleep, they don't rest, they go into a meditative state, and that is how they regain their energy, their hit points, and anything else that they may need. But I love this. They can choose from male, female, or neither. How are you neither? Now, you could say both, that's an option, but neither? So does that mean their facial features change to absolutely nothing? Do they walk around just as stick figures? No actual chest, or breasts, or hips, or thighs, or abs, or butt? They're just this blob of nothing? There is no such thing as non-binary. You are either one or the other. I don't care if you can change your gender. It's D&D. It's magic. We're dealing with fantasy. If you want to be a sorceress that changes their gender at will because you like messing with the other players, you can be. But the only characters and the only creatures in the D&D universe that can be neither are doppelgangers, because they take on the form of whatever it is that they are. Now, I'm talking about intelligent creatures. I'm not talking about things like mimics or anything like that. See, I know what I'm talking about. Dungeons & Dragons, at least the most recent 5th edition, has made it clear that players don't need to be confined by binary notions of gender. The game's Player's Handbook notes that some elves are androgynous in nature after Krellian's image, while noting that players can also choose to present their characters however they wish, because they are player characters. You can have your character look however you fucking want. Because it's fantasy. Because it's Dungeons & Dragons. Am I the only one that's getting this? That this is not needed? That this is absolutely fucking ridiculous? So what does the concept of fluidity have to do with the Drow, which have long been depicted as the evil sub-race of elves? Because they are. You know, they host raiding parties on the regular, kill any non-Drow elves that they see along the way, rape, pillage, plunder, and do a whole slew of evil things. Do you want to know what their #1 commodity is that they trade in? Secrets. Do you want to know the second biggest commodity that they trade in? Assassinations. Yes, Drow are evil. Very evil. The Drow come from an extremely matriarchal, gendered society and have widely rejected Krellian as their god. Yes, because they worship Loth, the spider goddess. Apparently, the person who wrote this article has never played Dungeons & Dragons and is only going off of what Tumblr is talking about. A Drow that can change their gender is seen as an affront to Drow culture, not only because it's a direct blessing from Krellian, but also because they can choose whether to be part of the ruling female class. Are we talking about choice privilege? They can choose to be part of the dominating class? That would take away the oppression of male toxicity and privilege, because you could actually become a female and take your place in the hierarchy of the matriarchy. This is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard of. Drow, with the ability to change their sex, usually become inspirations to other elves, and often turn out to be the heroes and peacemakers that emerge from a race that's generally viewed as not heroic. The term you are looking for is evil. Not just evil, but lawful evil. They go by a set of standards, and anytime a DM allows a player character to play a Drow, they usually try and mimic one Drow, and no one ever does it as well as R.A. Salvatore could. This is stupid. You are trying to change something that doesn't need to be changed. The Drow will just be one of many races explored in Mordekainen's Tome of Foes, which comes out on May 29th and costs $50. Wizards of the Coast, your product is not worth the paper it is printed on. Oh, and there's a note. This article was updated to reflect that the elves could change their biological sex, not their gender as indicated in the title. We also clarified that the Drow who could make these changes were not subjected to violence in Drow culture. Bravo! Bravo! You've taken one of the best races to come out of Dungeons & Dragons and turned them into a Tumblr blogger. Oh, there are 2 comments. Should we see the comments? Let's take a look. Let's read these comments. There are only 2, because this is the stupidest article I've ever read, and on top of that, the people who have read this understand it too. Let's see. Dust Flinger. This should be limited to a specific sub-race of elves. Elven culture, breeding, etc. is all based on a sexually dimorphic species. He said a bad word. He said sexually dimorphic. It means that the men are usually stronger than the women, except in the case of the drow, where the women are stronger than the men. But that doesn't matter, that doesn't matter. We need to make everyone equal. They all have to be just this mishmash of absolute garbage. And then Buchanan says, I believe the author means that they can change their biological sex. Everyone and anyone can already be gender fluid. Sex doesn't equal gender. Thank you, Tumblrite. We understand. I don't understand why this is a thing. I don't understand why this needs to be a thing. This does not need to be a trait. It's something that can already happen in the game. But because you need to pander, and you think by pandering you're gonna get a bunch of SJW Tumblr suckers to pay $50 plus tax to buy your merchandise, that you're going to stay afloat. Listen, as a fan of Dungeons and Dragons, I have one bit of advice for any of you who are still listening. Homebrew. The D&D wiki has thousands upon thousands of different things that you can choose from. Different weapons, items, races, classes. All of them extremely well, not all of them, most of them extremely well thought out. Take that into your game before you pay $50 for the bullshit that's going to be Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, because your game will be so much more interesting than just throwing a bunch of gender identity bullshit at the players and hoping it sticks. Dungeons and Dragons is supposed to be fun. There should not be any identity politics pushed onto it, and that's exactly what this is. They are pushing an agenda onto another fucking game. This is another hobby that they are trying to ruin because it's not equal outcome. There's not enough female players in Dungeons and Dragons. Let's up the quota. Every group except the very first group I ever played with has had female players. They're out there. People like Christian don't understand that because they don't fucking play. Leave our hobbies alone. And those are my thoughts, folks. I'd love to know yours. Let me know in the comments. If you like what I do here, please hit like, share, and subscribe. And if you do subscribe, hit that little bell icon so you know when I upload. If you'd like more of me, you can always join me every Tuesday at 4:00 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, where you can join Brockus, Zell, Lo-Fi, and myself for Proper Villains Live. Or you can always join me on my Discord. The links are down below. If you'd like to support the channel, I have links below for Patreon, Maker Support, and a link to PayPal for one-time donations. There's also a link to a very awesome merch store. But with that being said, this has been Help for the Guildless. My name, of course, is Antoine, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.